The Holy Gospel according to St. John, the first chapter. Glory to you, Lord. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. This is the testimony given by John when the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, "Who are you?" He confessed and did not deny it, but confessed, "I am not the Messiah." And they asked him, "What then? Are you Elijah?" He said, "I am not." "Are you the prophet?" He answered, "No." Then they said to him, "Who are you? Let us have an answer for those who sent us. What do you say about yourself?" He said, "I am the voice of one crying out in the wilderness, 'Make straight the way of the Lord,' as the prophet Isaiah said." Now they had been sent from the Pharisees. They asked him, "Why then are you baptizing, if you are neither the Messiah, nor Elijah, nor the prophet?" John answered them, "I baptize with water. Among you stands one whom you do not know, the one who is coming after me. I am not worthy to untie the thong of his sandal." This took place in Bethany, across the Jordan, where John was baptized. The Gospel of the Lord. So when I was a kid, I remember I always loved going camping. Camping was fun because you got to sleep in a tent. Camping was fun because you got to cook over an open fire. Camping was fun because you got to run around and explore the campground. But somehow as an adult, I've never been much into camping. And that's probably because as an adult, I realized that camping also meant sleeping on the ground. Camping meant living without heat or air conditioning. Camping meant dealing with gnats and mosquitoes all day and all night. Basically, camping meant that I was going to have to give up all kinds of things that made me really comfortable, and I like comfortable. I mean, I'm willing to be uncomfortable for a good cause, but why do I want to do that just for kicks and grins? So that makes me wonder whether I really would have been somebody in the early first century in Jerusalem who would have gone out to see John the Baptist. Because John, now himself, was sort of a weird guy who seemed to have enjoyed the discomfort that comes with camping. He loved to camp out on a regular basis. He wore clothing that would make you itch. And he ate food that even the Boy Scouts would revolt against. I'm just not sure that I would like that level of discomfort. But even for an average person going out to see John the Baptist, it wouldn't necessarily be a comfortable experience. If I had been a person in the early first century, going to see John at the Jordan River from Jerusalem would have involved quite a bit of physical discomfort. You couldn't just get there very easily. One of the things that people don't know until you go there, and I have been to the place where traditionally we think John the Baptist was baptizing. I went in an air-conditioned bus. That is the way to go there. Because you got to go from Jerusalem, which is about 3,500 feet above sea level, to the Jordan River, which is about 1,500 feet below sea level. So it's a trek, and it's a long, hard climb back up once you're done. You probably couldn't get there. It might involve camping, and it involved traveling through deserted and dangerous areas. The road from Jerusalem to Jericho that Jesus tells a story about, the story of the Good Samaritan, where the guy's traveling down that road. Nobody wanted to be on that road because it was dangerous, because it was deserted. There were no places to stop and get food, and you got mugged there a lot. That's where you would have had to travel to go see John the Baptist. It was a physically demanding and dangerous journey. I'm not sure that I would be up for that level of physical discomfort. But had I been willing to do that, when I got there, I would have faced a bunch of intellectual sort of irritation. Because today in the reading, people are sent from Jerusalem to go ask John, take this physically demanding journey, and then go ask him, "Who are you? And why are you doing this?" And when they get there, do you notice John never answers the question? I mean, he starts out with a whole bunch of, "I am not. I am not the Messiah." Cue Monty Python. "And I am not the prophet, and I am not Elijah." Okay, great. Who are you then? And then he goes, "Well, I'm like this guy from that Isaiah describes. I'm the voice crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord." Except that when Isaiah wrote those words, he meant it in the sense of, in the wilderness, comma, prepare the way of the Lord. That you were going to actually prepare this way, this road from Babylon back to Jerusalem, and all God's people were going to return. John rearranges the comma, so you're not quite sure what he means by the fact that he's the voice in the wilderness crying. And then they say, okay, so why are you baptizing? And he doesn't tell them. So they go back, irritated because they didn't get an answer to their question. They wanted a simple, easy answer, and they didn't get it. And I don't like it when I don't get the answers to my questions, and I would have gone back intellectually irritated as well as physically exhausted. But also, had I been a person in the early first century, I would have gone there and I would have experienced a great deal of emotional angst as well. Because the thing is, what I want from my religious experience, and maybe you do too, is I like, if I'm going to be really, it's going to be hard to get there, and it's going to be confusing, at least I want somebody to tell me that God is going to make things all right for me. Everything is going to be nice. My uncomfortable existence is going to be made better. I want to hear God is going to make me happy and wealthy. That would be nice. Not. God is going to take my uncomfortable existence and shake it up and maybe even make it more uncomfortable. And yet that's what John does. That's what John's message is. God is about to do something and everybody's going to be made even more uncomfortable than you are right now. And that is not what I came out to hear. No, none of those things are probably what I would have been looking for. I like comfort. I confess that I regularly ask God to make my life more comfortable and the lives of others more comfortable. And if you're ever in the hospital, and some of you have been when I've come to visit you and I pray with you, if I said, Lord God, this person is terribly in pain, but that's cool, make them more in pain, I'd get fired, really. That's not what you want me to ask for. That's not what I ask for. I understand that. I like comfortable, and so do you. Now I want to say that there is nothing necessarily wrong with being comfortable and happy. And there's nothing particularly noble or salvific in being uncomfortable in and of itself. But I do also realize that sometimes the desire to be comfortable can keep us from a genuine experience of what God is doing in our lives. After all, we remember John the Baptist not because his fashion sense turned out to be better than everybody else, but because it turned out that God was using John's uncomfortable situation and uncomfortable message to prepare people for the coming of Jesus in their lives. And if we're not willing to suspend the desire to be comfortable in our religious experience, we may in fact miss out on the actions and the opportunities that God is giving us in our own time and in our own place. And let's face it, things are not always very comfortable for us in our world right now, and the more uncomfortable things get, the stronger that pull of, please, let's keep things as comfortable as we can make them, the stronger that becomes in our lives. So in this Advent season, as we consider what it means to prepare for God coming into our lives, I think it's important that part of that message means that, or is, that we sometimes have to resist this great urge to somehow keep things comfortable at all costs, comfortable in my life at all costs. Because sometimes keeping things comfortable is what prevents me from hearing and experiencing God. So sometimes, if we want to have and I just know this in my life, that sometimes if I want to have a genuine experience of God in my life, I have to accept a little bit of physical discomfort, which may or may not involve sleeping on the ground. Because I thought, a lot of the things that we have to do that may make us uncomfortable don't probably involve camping and sleeping on the ground. And then I was looking back at the green sheet in the back that describes the mission trip to Honduras, and it says, these will be camping conditions, expect to sleep on the ground. So it may be that serving God in your life does really mean that physical discomfort. But for other people, for lots of us each day in our lives, some of the physical discomfort simply means thinking about how we spend our time and our money, and are we willing to spend time and money on things that make us give up other things? As soon as you start asking people to give up their time or give up their money, everybody gets squirrely because that starts to make us uncomfortable. And we live in a society in which religion is fine and religious expression is fine as long as it doesn't take anything more than your spare time and as long as it doesn't cost more than pocket change. Anything else, wait a minute, that's making us uncomfortable, that's not supposed to be the way it is, we tell ourselves. But often, for us too, if we're not willing to experience some of that discomfort, we're not going to end up being in the places that God wants us to be. The people who had a genuine living experience of God through John the Baptist went into it understanding that they were going to have to suffer a little bit of physical discomfort. And the same is true for us. Sometimes for us too. If we're going to have a real and living experience of God in our lives, we have to be willing to accept and to put up with some intellectual irritation, or at least confusion. Because I would like God to tell me, here's how stuff works, think this, believe this, do this, it'll all work out fine for you. And that's just generally not how it happens. Even and especially if you spend time reading the Bible, you recognize that there are rarely any easy answers. And if you found an answer that you think is easy, you probably haven't thought about it for a while. Because Martin Luther in the Catechism, he used to talk about, years later, he says, I've been teaching things like the Ten Commandments my whole life. I still have to learn, because there are still more things about the complexity of everything God's trying to tell me that I can't get by a simple reading of this. And just like with John the Baptist, more often the way God works in our lives, we are people who are being called to struggle with and wrestle with not just the questions, but also the answers that we get. And to figure out what that means in our lives. And it's irritating, and it's confusing, and it's hard when I'd like to have the easy answers, but often being willing to put up with the discomfort of the confusion and the irritation is the way we grow in genuine, real faith. And sometimes for us too, having a genuine experience of God in our lives means that we've got to be willing to put up with a little bit of emotional angst. Because here's the thing about John the Baptist that was also true. John the Baptist, he was weird. I mean, people in the first century thought he was weird. They continue to think this. We have other contemporary accounts besides the New Testament where he was just an odd guy. And if you went out to see him, you are odd too. Even if you just thought it was, sort of a novelty and nice. But you had to be willing to go with, I'm doing something that's not so popular and not so normal. Many of us grew up at least believing that the culture in which we were living in, religious expression, or at least Christian religious expression, was normal. It was sometimes even popular. But that's not the way it is anymore. And sometimes practicing our faith, even if it's just getting up once in a while and coming to church, feels like it's viewed much like people going out to see John the Baptist. That's just a little strange. That's just a little weird. Why do you do that? And we want that sort of feeling to go away, like, no, you shouldn't be saying that. You should be praising me for doing this. But part of, just like what John the Baptist first hears, part of actually experiencing God in our lives means that we've got to be folks who are willing to accept the discomfort of growing in our faith in ways that are not popular, that are not normal to the society around us, and being okay with it. Because sometimes the desire to be comfortable really is the biggest hindrance to our growing in faith. Back on All Saints Sunday, you may remember that while we were all in church worshiping in Sutherland, Texas, in First Baptist Church, a gunman walked in and killed 26 people. It was the worst church mass shooting ever in American history. The next day, a guy named Russell Moore, who is the president of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission at the Southern Baptist Convention, of which First Baptist was part, wrote an op-ed piece, and it got published in the Washington Post. And some of you may have read this. I posted this up on Facebook. His main point was that from the first century on, violence against Christians has never succeeded in destroying or intimidating the church. But at the end of the article, he made an interesting and I think really important observation. He said, "To eradicate churches, our opponents will need a better strategy. They should see that Christianity can be easier suffocated with comfort to the point that we forget who we are than it can be terrorized with violence." And I think he's right about that. Sometimes it really is comfort that gets in our way. Sometimes it's the desire to be comfortable that keeps us from experiencing God in our lives. And sometimes being comfortable really can suffocate us and make us forget about the God who suffered more than simply a little discomfort for all of us. So in this Advent season, I invite you to be open to being a little uncomfortable. Not because it makes you better or holier than others, but because sometimes the willingness to be uncomfortable allows the Holy Spirit to draw you into the places, the experiences, and the questions that help you more fully experience the coming of Jesus in your life and in the life of the world, all of us.